We are very happy to host this event, and thank you so much to our candidates and all of you who are interested parties to be here. So it's a gorgeous morning, and we appreciate you taking the time to take interest in this. I am happy to introduce Blake Brooks, who is State Savings Bank presenting sponsor, and he has a couple of words to share. Thank you.
All right, I'll use the mic. Well, good morning. I am Blake Brooks, and on behalf of State Savings Bank, thank you for coming out for the candidates breakfast. Before I get started, just want to get a few thank yous out. First of all, to Michelle Barefoot, Christy Johnson, and Stephanie Scott for organizing this event. Thank you. Thanks to Crystal Mountain for also hosting. It's a great honor, and we really appreciate their hospitality. And most importantly, I want to say thank you to the moderator and the candidates. We'll give them a more formal introduction in a moment. As we come up in the election season, it's about 40 years now, we've seen the decline in print media and the rise of the digital age between the internet, dark web, social media, which I don't know a lot about, and AI, which I know absolutely nothing about. But with that said, it is increasingly difficult to discern what's real, what's not, what's true, and what's false. So I do think today, I think we've got a unique opportunity to see our candidates face to face, to ask questions, to learn, to listen. And I think that's just an invaluable opportunity. But perhaps something that's even more invaluable is the opportunity to interact with our neighbors and hopefully to become better educated voters, which I think at the end of the day is something we all can aspire to. So with all that said, State Savings Bank is locally owned and operated. We've been around for 125 years. And we've seen a few elections, and we hope to see a few more. And we do value the opportunity to visit with our clients, our customers, to learn, to listen, what their dreams and aspirations are, and hopefully we can help them achieve those dreams. So I would ask, if you haven't already, please take an opportunity to stop at one of our 8 locations around Northwest Lower Michigan and learn more about State Savings Bank and the Yes I Can spirit. And before I turn it back to Michelle, I do have one small request here. We have provided all the candidates with gift bags from locally sourced products from right here in Benzie County. We also have one on all your tables. So if I could ask everybody sitting at your tables here, if you would please rise. Underneath one chair at each table, you're going to find a Yes I Can sticker. And if you have that sticker, you're the winner of the gift bag. Thanks for coming. Have a great day.
Thank you. And yeah, there's your cardio for the next topic. Hello and welcome to our 2024 Candidates Breakfast. The Benzie Area Chamber of Commerce thanks you for attending and extends that gratitude to our amazing candidates that are joining us today. I'm Michelle Barefoot, the Executive Director of the Benzie Area Chamber of Commerce. Our Chamber's Advocacy and Awareness Council, led by Christy Johnson and Stephanie Scott. If you could please stand and be recognized. We are a political arm of the Benzie Chamber. We look forward to hosting these types of events during the election cycle to give our residents and business owners a chance to hear directly from our candidates. We would like to give thanks to our gracious host, Stephanie Scott, Jen King, and the team here at Crystal Mountain, and to our amazing sponsors, our presenting sponsor, Blake Brooks and Lindy Evans, and the entire team at State Savings Bank, and of course, Trevor Koch and Winnie Wara and their great team at Traverse City Tourism for making this event possible. Just some housekeeping notes, if you could turn your mobile devices to mute or vibrate. We would like this to be a respectful and informative discussion and ask that each candidate is given time to speak without interruptions. All questions will be given by our moderator, Mark Klein. Candidates will be chosen at random to start each question series and will volley according to the party and district until each candidate has been given the opportunity to answer the question. I will be holding up time cards indicating when there are minutes, 30 seconds, and 10 seconds, and we'll promptly move along once time is up. As a reminder, this is a forum and not a debate. We will be giving each candidate an appropriate time to introduce themselves. And I'm going to turn this over to Mark. We will have Rep. Bergman on monitor here. And Mark, could you please introduce our candidates? Starting with.
Representative Benzie. So we have in order, we have Callie Barr, who is running for the First District Congress. We have Betsy Kofia, who's the current incumbent representative for the 103. We have Mr. Tom Bratton, who is representing Senate candidate, current Congresswoman Alyssa Slotkin. We have Kathy Albro, who is running for the 104. She's an independent. Congressman Jack Bergman will be joining us on Zoom for a video, I believe. We have incumbent and current Representative John Roth. And then we have candidate for the 103, Miss Lisa Trombley. Thank you, candidates, for being here. My name is Mark Klein. I'm excited to be back. Thank you, Michelle Barefoot, for having me. And let's get it going with question number 1.
Oh, we're gonna let them talk.
Oh.
Let Betsy go.
We have the cold open, I guess. And we'll start with Representative Kofia.
Introductions. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you, Michelle and the Benzie Area Chamber and our sponsors and all of you for the opportunity to be here today. My name is Betsy Kofia. I am the state representative for the 103rd House District. And so these maps all get made up right every 10 years. So this is a fairly new map. It's all of Leelanau County. It's half of Grand Traverse County, and it's a corner of Benzie County. So the Lake Ann area, Elmira and Platte Townships. I share both Benzie and Grand Traverse County with my colleague, Rep. John Roth, who represents the rest of Grand Traverse and Benzie. So the reason that I'm running and a little bit about me, I'm in public service. I'm a former Grand Traverse County Commissioner. I served 2 terms. Before that, I was a Head Start social worker who worked with families of young children in Benzie, Leelanau, and Grand Traverse County. So that overlapped nicely with my current role. And I'm a former newspaper editor. The reason that I'm in public service is because I love my community. This is my home. I've spent nearly my entire life figuring out how to make a life as a young person, a student, a young professional, and a not so young professional. And I am very invested in making sure that we make our region increasingly a place where we all can thrive, that our young people can stay here and make a life, that our businesses can thrive, that they have the workforce that they need, that we protect the incredible gift of the natural resources that we get to call home, which is world class. We do live in an amazing part of the world, and we know, and again, this is part of why I got into politics and public service, is that while it is an incredible place to live, it's becoming increasingly challenging for people to make it here. The cost of housing and our childcare desert, we have some major challenges that not only impact individuals, young people, families, seniors, but also our business community and our ability to have a thriving economic future. So working with whomever, any good faith partner on tackling some of our toughest challenges. Some of what we've been able to do in my first term in the legislature that I'm really excited about are things like removing barriers for communities to be able to build housing. When I was on the county commission,
I was always frustrated that a tool called brownfield redevelopment, which allows you to renovate properties and put them back on the tax rolls and into positive production. The state law prevented us from using brownfield funds for housing. And I thought, this is dumb. This is our community's greatest need, and we need to be able to use this tool. So I was excited when I got to the legislature in my first year, we actually voted to explicitly put housing as an allowable use for brownfield, to put a tool on the table for our local communities. It doesn't solve the issue, but it helps. And I believe that our responsibility as leaders and public servants is to come alongside in partnership with our communities for our greatest challenges. I voted to put $65 million into this year's state budget to support our childcare providers and small business owners, and bonuses for our childcare workers, because this is another major issue impacting our families and the business community. My track record has always been, I will work across the aisle. I've worked with Senator John DeMuse, Senator John Bumstead, bringing good things forward for Northern Michigan. Here in Benzie County last year, we got in the budget over $2 million that Commissioner Art Janot over there brought to me as a request to address and enhance public safety for Benzie County. We got over $2 million in the budget to build a communications and safety tower so that our first responders could actually communicate with one another across our rural county. And we got that done, and we did it together. What you get from me as a rep is what you will continue to get if you give me a second term, which is practical, pragmatic, bipartisan work, and Team Northern Michigan all the way. This is my home. I will always advocate for the people of Northern Michigan, and I couldn't be prouder to serve. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you, Representative Kofia. We're going to turn it over to Ms. Lisa Trombley.
Good morning. I'm Lisa Trombley. Thank you all for being here. What a great venue and a great opportunity to be able to engage with you all. I am born and raised in Michigan. I've lived kind of around the state, born near Detroit, grew up in Holland, went to school in Ann Arbor, and am really blessed to have landed back here. I chose to move back here 6 years ago after I retired out of the DC area. Blessed to have served my country in my way, doing a lot of government, large-scale government programs. So I understand the good, the bad, and perhaps the ugly of government, but more importantly, how government and industry can work together to address problems. I am sitting in this seat because I'm concerned about the direction that Michigan is heading. And I don't think Michigan is being all that it can be. And I joke, I'm a Marine mom, and I'm using an Army phrase, but I think it's true. And I believe Lansing is adding insult to injury with their spending. We are spending more, and yet we're not getting more to show for it. And I think something needs to be different, and that difference, we need to choose different leadership. Leadership matters and experience matters. As a business leader, I was responsible for setting budgets and priorities. I executed within those budgets and those timeframes, including making investments both to deliver value and to drive and manage growth where necessary. And I believe those same practices need to be brought to Lansing. So I joke, I'm coming off my paddleboard and I am making a run at Lansing and hope to move Michigan in a better direction. I believe it can be significantly more business friendly, workforce friendly, and ultimately family friendly. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Trombley. Ms. Albro.
Well, thank you so much. I guess I better use this. Thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to help you learn more about all of us so you can make great choices when you fill out your ballot coming up very soon. I got into, actually I wasn't very political at the beginning. My life experiences have led me to this point. I started in high school working with abused and neglected children, which led me to want to be a teacher. I became a teacher, then teacher of teachers in very high poverty communities all over the country. When our daughter, we couldn't find good childcare, I opened a childcare center in Grand Rapids and then opened other employer-supported childcare centers.
with 80 employees, including also a small business educational toy store that I owned for 30 years in Grand Rapids. So all of those things, and now I'm a small farmer, have led me to running for Congress in 2018 in the Grand Rapids area. And when my husband and I retired up here to property that we had owned for many years, I decided to run as a Democrat last time for the same seat. Over these last 2 years since I ran, I've worked in community building, nonpartisan community building throughout the state, and found that when we don't bring politics into the discussion, it's a beautiful thing to see people speaking together, sharing phone numbers, different things. We put people together at tables with people they don't know, and it's phenomenal what we see. So that made me decide to run as an independent, and that's what brings me here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Albright. Representative Rob.
I guessed I'd be next. State Representative John Roth, the 104th District, which is 80% of Benzie County. I have 6 counties: Manistee, Benzie, part of Wexford, part of Grand Traverse, part of Antrim, and part of Kalkaska. 56 townships, 1 city. I have 1 city, 1 solid city of Frankfurt. Love my Frankfurt. Thank God for 1 city. A lot of villages.
It's a nice city.
I'm here because I'm a father of 2 daughters who are 24 and 22, and I want to see their future better. I don't like the path we're on, and that's partly my fault, I guess, because my first 2 years we were in the majority, and I didn't get everything done that I wanted to. Second term, this term, it's been a little more of a struggle, and I have a lot more to do. There's a lot to be done. I am a husband, a wife of 37 years. She has been a nurse at Munson Medical Center. I finally got her to leave the floor, and now she's doing advanced registration. So she's 60. I won't say she's 60. She's going to kill me for that. Yeah. She's worked very hard, and she deserves to do a little less physical activity at the hospital. But I was able to get some things done. We actually got a BSN degree that is at community colleges. That happened in my first term. So the nurses could actually study and work here in their own communities and do this program. Didn't have to get up and move to Michigan State or U of M or Wayne State or wherever. They were able to do it right here at home. Simple little barber bill that I got done in my first term. Barber bill was that in order to be a barber, you had to go down to Lansing Community College and study for 2 years. Now you can keep working under a licensed barber to get your degree right there at wherever you're cutting hair. So great program. I have to say that I'm a little salty this morning. I apologize right up front. I was in Lansing on Wednesday. The bipartisanship that I'm hearing was less than evident on Wednesday. A lot of games, and it needs to stop. Better policy is when you have both sides working together and providing amendments to make bills better. That has not happened for the last 2 years. None of our amendments have been approved. None of our conversations have been heard. This has to stop. My first term, it was bipartisan. You had a legislature that was Republican, you had a Democratic governor. Governor was very clear. You bring a bill to me, you better have a bunch of Democrats on it, or I'm not gonna sign it. Don't like she's in charge. It happened. I had 6 bills passed, and then the Senate went home early. My 6 other bills died in the Senate floor. This time we got 1 bill passed this year. It has not been good bipartisan work. They haven't had to. They got majority, they got trifecta, they don't require us. So there's a lot of things that could have been very good bills that could have had an amendment or 2 for the public side of the aisle that would have made those bills better. I want to see that change. We need to be working together more than we can. But I will tell you, I'm still salty from Wednesday. There are some things that went through that we had no idea were coming. And vote on and do it. And the one thing you're required to do in Lansing is vote. That is part of your job. And there were bills that people weren't forced to vote on. And that needs to change. The culture has to change in Lansing. And I will work to make that happen. But it has to change, and that's why I'm running again, I'm running more fiercely now. After another less than bipartisan day. So that's why I'm here, that's why I'm running, I'm gonna make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Ryan. Ms. Callie Bar, you're up next.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for having me. Thanks for everybody for coming out this morning. Said hi to most of you while you were eating your breakfast, probably caught you with a mouthful of something. Sorry about that. I grew up in this district, so Traverse City and Sheboygan. And Sheboygan is actually where my family goes back 5 generations. I met my husband at Sheboygan Area High School, the same high school my parents met and got married out of, and my grandparents. So I'm gonna be keeping my kids over here at East. They're not gonna go to Sheboygan. 9/11 occurred while I was in high school. And Matt, my husband, he called the Marine Corps recruiter that day. He wanted to enlist. And probably not unusual, in our district, we have high rates of military service. You know, Michigan sends just as many Marines to the Marine Corps as California and Texas, and we have 1/3 of the population. And that's just one branch of service. So Matt and I were married very young. We were 18, 19 years old, traveled around the country. I worked to get my teaching degree during that time from Central Michigan University. We got any chips in the room? Yes, there is always one. That's on the whole campaign trail. I always need a chip. All right, fire up chips. But Matt came back from Iraq and Afghanistan with post-traumatic stress, and at the time, an undiagnosed traumatic brain injury. And so I segued in my career from teaching to working for military families. I worked with the Rosalind Carter Institute for Caregiving and Blue Star families. We were stationed in Quantico, Virginia at the time, and so I worked with our congressional representatives and folks trying to get them to really care about our community. And that work really inspired me to get my law degree later in life. My girls were 5 and 2 at the time, so very clear memories of showing up to law lecture with my notes covered in unicorn stickers. I graduated from the University of Michigan Law School with honors. I then worked as a business and tort litigation attorney at Jones Day. We were also then building a pilot program to give veterans free legal services. So I was a part of that initiative. And then, you know, during this time, we've had this gridlock, this increasing polarization. And for my husband and I, we felt like it was so important to show up for our community. You know, it's important to show up here today with you. You know, growing up in this area, I see kind of throughout even this whole campaign, the resiliency, the grit, the innovation, the creativity of folks here in our rural areas. And I think it's really important to have a conduit to bring those ideas and that grittiness to Washington, D.C. No one's going to work harder. So I want to thank you so much for your time and look forward to having the next hour here with you.
Thank you, Ms. Collins. I believe we're gonna have Ms. Collinsworth introduce Jack Bergman.
Good morning, everyone, and of course, thank you to the Benzie Chamber and State Bank for having us here. My name is Melanie Collinsworth. I'm the District Director for Congressman Jack Bergman, and he's not present, but we do have 36 plus counties, and he is all over the place. Probably the hardest working man I've ever met in my life. But we do have a video with him answering the questions. So again, thank you.
Mr. Bratton, if you would introduce Congresswoman Slotkin.
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Mark. Tom Bratton, I'm Northern Michigan political manager for Alyssa Slotkin, Congresswoman Slotkin, who's running for U.S. Senate, the vacant U.S. Senate seat. Just in this introduction, I'd like to give you just a quick background about me, how I got onto Alyssa Slotkin's team, and then why I think she's going to be a great U.S. Senator for the state of Michigan. So I grew up in Ottawa County, a farming family. My dad was a turkey farmer. Didn't really want to go into the farming business. My parents were like, well, then you need to go to college, and by the way, you're going to pay for it. So I was like, well, that doesn't leave me with a lot of options, so maybe the military can help me out. So I got a military scholarship to go to college. And after I graduated from college, I went off to the military and flew C-130s for the Air Force. And while I was deployed, Middle East and Afghanistan, I'd look around and I'd see, well, we're spending a lot of resources here, but I don't see a lot of progress. And I was like, who's making these decisions? And I was like, well, that's our policy makers. So when I came back to States, I had a lot of different, I had some different options for with some different careers, but ultimately wanted to get into the political landscape. So the U.S. House of Representatives was offering a 2-year fellowship, a nonpartisan fellowship to get into politics, and it landed me in Michigan's first congressional district. So yes, that's Congressman Bergman's office. So I did 2 years in Congressman Bergman's office with working for Republicans, Democrats, Independents, Moderates. I wasn't partisan. I was just happy to serve. And so when they offered me a follow-up position, I was said, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity, but I'm going to throw my hat and my name in the hat to work for Alyssa Slotkin. Why? Because when I saw that a congresswoman who's from the state of Michigan, who served 3 tours in Iraq alongside our military, worked for both President Bush and President Obama in national security, and as a sitting congresswoman, is now sitting on the bipartisan problem solvers caucus. She represents the reason why I wanted to get into politics. It's someone who can cut down the partisan walls, finger pointing. She proudly tells folks that her dad's a lifelong Republican and that her mom, before she unfortunately passed, was a lifelong Democrat. We need people who know how to communicate to both sides of the aisle, and it is an underrated trait. It's an absolute privilege to work for her. And she needs to be our next U.S. Senator because she has the experience, leadership, and integrity for what our country needs. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. All right, now we are going to get into the questions for today. Question number 1. So much of our rural economy requires investment in business and talent attraction and retention. However, one of the major barriers in Benzie County is the lack of affordable housing stock. The current average home price in Benzie County is $380,000 compared to Wexford County at $195,000. What actions would you take to increase affordable housing inventory? Representative Roth, you are going to start. You have 3 minutes.
All right. This is the toughest question out there, of course, and it's every district. It's not just ours. It's all across the country. There is no silver bullet. I'm going to tell you that right up front. Communities need to work together, multiple different ways to make this happen. One problem we have at 104th is being able to expand our sewer and water systems in order to get out where we can actually make housing. So I've been calling for and asking Leo Department to help me with infrastructure needs of water and sewer since the beginning of this term. Haven't had a lot of help yet, still working on it. Michigan wants to give us dollars for that. They want to help us. There is money for it. But without water and sewer in our area, that's not going to happen. It's not so, but every community's got to look at their zone. Is their zoning actually encouraging actual development? Frankfurt's a good example, working with Josh Mills over there. They can't build downtown. The downtown homes gone. They're probably the worst in our whole district. Those homes have gone up 600% in the last 5 years. Downtown is short-term rentals, second homes. Where are the teachers of Frankfurt going to work or live? We have to expand out and help them do that. But you can't just throw up a home. Just can't throw up a home. The way the state's trying to regulate septic systems potentially is a barrier. They are talking about making counties actually inspect these every 5 and 7 years. It bankrupt our health departments. There's not enough inspectors to do it. So what do we need? Water and sewer. And without that, I don't know how we expand. I propose to the Leo Department a revolving fund for our Habitat for Humanities. This is a revolving fund that the state would provide the upfront money. As these developments and houses are built, you would return the money after it's all paid for. So working with Jay White, Jay and I worked here at Crystal Mountain way back in the day. And we were trying to do that. We're trying to get the Leo Department to actually, they thought it was a great idea. Again, no action yet. But it is not a silver bullet. There is money, but without some of the infrastructure in our community, especially the 104th district, we aren't gonna build anything unless we get that infrastructure first. So I will keep pushing for that, keep asking to do it. But without that, we are somewhat limited, unfortunately. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Roth. Ms. Albro.
I have some assistance here. Go ahead. Oh, okay, all right. Well, I brought a visual aid also, because a picture's worth 1,000 words and I don't have that much time, so. I live on a small farm, my husband and I do, right outside of Bel Air. And on our corner, there's 3 acres of vacant land, and I think the owner would probably sell that for about $8,000. So the other day I was thinking, you know, how could we put some housing there? So I went out to the land and I drew this sketch. Did you get one over there? Jake? Okay. So what it involves is a 400 square foot approximately modular home that includes all of the amenities that at least one single person would need, including a washer and dryer. It would be energized by a heat pump and a mini split. It would be its own community, and this could actually house between 15 and 20 people, maybe within a year's time. So it would involve probably starting an employee-owned co-op, creating these modular components, and that would be a great business for this part of the state, maybe some in the Upper Peninsula too. We would definitely need to work on zoning, and I think that's where our community comes in. We need to co-create our vision with our community so that they understand we're a mile from Shanty Creek. And I've talked to the workers there, and we have service workers here at Crystal too that are probably in the same situation, where some of them are living in employer housing in a hotel room. Think about changing to at least a 400 square foot home that they would own, and that with the option of adding a 200 or 400 square foot extension to that, up to maybe 1,200 square feet. So this is just an example. But the thing is that where I live, you have to have 2 acres for every home, and every home has to be at least 1,200 square feet. So we would need our community to get behind this and understand that the same township that has Shanty Creek in it, Kearney Township, also has those zoning regulations. So they need to be flexible. I came up with this idea after reading the book, Escaping the Housing Trap by Strong Towns. I highly encourage you to look up Strong Towns. And what they said is we are not going to solve this problem as long as we're thinking in the old paradigm. We need a new paradigm. We need new developers with different mindsets. The developers we're using right now are building mansions. We need to find people that are willing to do the work and make this happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Albro. We are going to move on to Ms. Barr.
Thank you so much. So housing issue across the country and definitely issue all across this district. In our district, just so you're aware, I say we're very Michigander when we talk about it because we get to use 2 hands. It's the entire Upper Peninsula and the top third of the Mitten. So we're one of the largest congressional districts in the United States. And so when we look at what we can do about housing and really at the federal level, we need really flexible funding initiatives that builders can actually use, right? Because when you're building affordable housing, those margins are very thin. And there are some steps in this direction, some legislation, for instance, like modernizing the USDA, like rural housing development loans to incentivize construction and bolster like affordable housing options. They had offered 2-year repayment, so just other types of loans that are longer to pay off, better for municipalities and governments, longer loan terms, below market rates. The other thing you're really looking at too are supply chains. We know that's an issue right now, right? So it's also continuing the efforts to bring down inflation for the actual cost of building. The other thing, there are some interesting initiatives I've been looking at with modular homes because they are much quicker to build and to bring up into place. I was at the Northern Economic Alliance Chamber. They had that not too long ago, and they were specifically looking at that in areas like ours where you know, you can get housing in place a lot quicker for folks. Cause I'm telling, cause I hear it, right? Got people all around our district that are like, please help me get out of my mom's basement, right? And the other thing is when we have smaller housing units, affordable units that are available, and we have a lot of elderly that are ready to kind of move into that next stage of life, it then helps to free up some of these other homes for our working families, you know, folks with kids, professionals, things like that.
Thank you, Mr. Archer. We are now going to be sharing Congressman Bergman's answer on the TV.
Sorry, guys. This is my first video.
Well, what we need. Sorry. The issue of housing doesn't just lie in affordability, but also in attainability. Many middle-class earners and households make too much to qualify for low-income or subsidized housing, yet they don't make enough to buy or rent a new or existing home on their own. What we need is attainable housing. Large-scale development tends to be rare in smaller, more rural areas with fewer residents. Construction costs are often high, which in turn disincentivizes private investment. A lack of access to credit in these locations also limits funding for the upkeep of existing housing. Therefore, a bridge must be built for this missing middle ground of housing. One way Congress can address this is by strengthening the low-income housing tax credit. I backed the Tax Relief for American Families and Workers Act during this Congress. This bill will restore a 12.5% increase in housing credit state allocation that expired in 2021. I'm also co-sponsor of the Affordable Housing Credit Improvement Act. This bill supports the financing of new housing by increasing the amount of housing credits allocated to each state by 50% and improving housing credit program to better support at-risk and underserved communities, including tribal communities and extremely low-income families. These are just some of the first steps we've taken at the federal level to address the housing crisis. What we will ultimately need in our state and country is an economic revitalization. That's why I'm working in my role as House Budget Committee Oversight Task Force Chair to rein in government spending and plug the hole in the sinking ship of our economy. With a holistic approach like this, we will surely see a boom in our first district housing.
Mr. Bradman, if you.
Yes, housing. So this is an important issue for me as well. I experienced it firsthand 3 years ago when I was trying to move to Traverse City. Almost didn't happen because we couldn't find a house. So it required me to leave my family for 3 weeks, maybe 4, and move into the state park. Not for everybody, but it was worth it. I got the job. But I can see where some families might not have wanted to take on that challenge. It might not have had the flexibility to do it. So we need to finally address the issue of housing. And Alyssa believes that being on a pathway to home ownership should just be a faraway dream. It should be a realistic goal. So investing in affordable housing is the key to economic growth. And she does it by making sure, and continues to do it by making sure we collaborate with the public and private sector. And she's been able to tackle this issue at the federal level in a way that benefits both Michiganders and boost our economy. Just this past September, last year, I should say, she introduced the bill, the Workforce Housing Development Act, which is a bill that creates a competitive grant program at HUD where it increases resources for home developers. Additionally, she co-sponsored the Neighborhood Homes Investment Act, which is a bipartisan bill that gave it business-related tax credit and additional funds were saved for our home developers. And with the goal of creating over 500,000 starter homes in under-resourced communities over the next decade. And in just this past year, she was able to secure $1.6 million in federal funds for a housing development in her district. And I can't wait for what she's going to do statewide. We can solve the housing crisis and promote economic growth at the same time without having to move to the state.
Thank you, Mr. Ratman. Representative Kofia.
Thank you. So this is one of, I would say, the most pressing issues that we face as a state and a region. I mentioned it in my introduction. And let me be clear, this is not an abstract concept. This is just an idea that I'm trying to figure out. I have lived this firsthand. I mentioned growing up in this area. I grew up in a hardworking, working class family in Kilkasket County. And as a young adult, as a student, working 3 jobs to put myself through college, and then as a young professional, I lived rental to rental to rental. I had the roommate meet somebody, move out, and suddenly I have to come up with twice the rent. And that was when it wasn't as expensive as it is right now. Right now, folks, this is just so visceral and serious to me. I've knocked doors in a mobile home park in my district where people are being charged $1,500 a month to live in a single wide. And they're beta bus drivers and Benzie bus drivers, they're newspaper reporters, they're construction workers, they're restaurant workers, they're massage therapists, they're seniors. These are our neighbors. This is a severe issue that I believe requires us as people in public service and our community of leaders to work together to come up with solutions. I agree with my colleague, Rep. Roth, there's no silver bullet. However, there are many things we can and should be doing in the public sector to be partners with our communities. One of the things I voted to do as a county commissioner in a bipartisan vote, we know time is money when you're developing housing, and the time that it takes, the red tape just to get through the approval process can be onerous. So we voted to digitize our building permit process, which saves significant time getting all the permits that you need to do, cutting red tape wherever possible. Other things I've done in the legislature, budget show priority. The Michigan state budget last year, I voted for the first time ever to put housing funding as a state priority for the first time. We built a housing fund and the corporate income tax, some of that money will go straight to housing. Other things that I've been able to vote to do, I am supportive of a bill that would decouple MISHDA funding, housing funding from a requirement that doesn't make any sense for rural communities. That requires if you're going to build housing, it has to be directly next to or in a downtown area. Think about Northern Michigan. That doesn't make any sense in rural areas. So we have a bill that would actually remove that requirement and still free up funding for more rural communities to access and build housing where it makes sense for us. Other things, let me see, DNR. So I've been working bipartisanly, Senator John DeMoose and I are working right now to get the DNR to change some regulations around state-owned land to allow for housing to be built on state-owned land, given over to the school district to build housing in Leelanau County, which will help Benzie County as well, so that our teachers can have housing. And John and I were just on a call last week and we got the DNR to agree to do it in exchange for us not changing the law for the whole state. We are doing whatever we can using the resources and the tools that we have in our position to bring more tools to the table for this crisis that our communities are facing. It impacts you, your workforces, it impacts the long-term future of our region, and you can count on me to continue to treat it like the front burner, the issue that it deserves to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Kofia. Ms. Romley.
Thank you. This is, I mean, it's a critical issue. It's one of, you know, almost in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, having that shelter. So there is an emotional, clearly there's an emotional aspect to this challenge. as legislators, and I know I've said in previous forums, I struggle with Lansing being able to fix it, or the federal government being able to fix it, except where they may be creating barriers or establishing mandates or implementing regulations that then make it that much harder for industry to be able to do that. So where government, where Lansing can work with and inspire and motivate developers and investors to help solve this problem. It is clearly a problem. It's very complex, and it's not a one size fits all problem, nor is there a one size fits all solution. When you're speaking home ownership, by design, there is an investment in that, and whether it's as a homeowner, you're investing in your home for their future, or as a developer, establishing homes for others for the future. Different motivations there and different potential solutions that could be driven and motivated and incentivized. I think it's critical to understand the root cause so that we can address those underlying issues. And it's going to be different in different geographies. It's going to be different at different levels and for different types of housing needs.
Thank you, Ms. Conley. We will now move on to question 2. Since the implementation of the Michigan Healthy Climate Program, policies have been put into place to reach carbon neutrality by 2050. While this may be a realistic goal for our urban and suburban communities that have robust infrastructure, this goal has led to many barriers for rural communities. Namely, the lack of quality infrastructure and dependence on fossil fuels, such as propane, fuel oil, and coal that our remote communities depend on for heat. How can we better frame policy expectations for these communities to help them meet the goals of the state? We are going to start with Ms. Trombley. You have 3 minutes.
Another very interesting challenge for us. I might disagree that it's all that reasonable for urban areas. I think there are serious challenges. Energy is so critical to everything. It is critical for us to live. It is critical for businesses. It's critical for us for mobility. We need an all of the above energy solution for the state, for the country. That said, going back, pulling on my career history, energy is a national security issue for us as well. But we're not talking about that here. It is, I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with having goals. We all want the cleanest environment. We all want our natural resources to be preserved and protected. We all care for each other in that perspective. And goals are a wonderful thing. But goals, especially when they're made by governments that reflects down through businesses to individuals, those must be reasonable. They must be practical. There must be a clear path to executing within those parameters, or they need to be a goal as opposed to a mandate. And I think some of that is blurred these days. And it's going to be critical for Michigan, particularly. We live where I'll use the phrase I heard this morning, we live on the 45th parallel. Half of the year we're heating our houses. It's critical that we have access to the energy sources that we need to do that and for our businesses to move forward. That said, let's see, I'm going to encourage us to strongly look at ways to ensure that our goals are great, but we are not going to implement any restrictions that are not consistent with technology and the ability for those particular sources to be implemented within the infrastructure. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Trombley. Representative Cofia.
Thank you. Really important question. So I believe a couple of key points to be made around this question are, first of all, I want to give huge applause to our rural energy generators, such as Cherryland Electrical Co-op, which is already ahead of the state, is a leader as a rural generator of our energy in meeting some of these goals for cleaner and more renewable energy. In fact, Rachel Johnson's not here today, but shout out to CEO Rachel Johnson and Tony Anderson before her for being ahead of the curve, best in the class. They are on a path right now to get to 100% carbon-free and renewable by 2030, which is a full decade ahead of what the state we just adopted for clean energy goals in Michigan this past year. And I think it's very important to acknowledge the leadership that they, Traverse City Light and Power, and our other more rural community cooperatives who generate our energy, they are already leading the state. So I made a point as a sitting freshman legislator, as we were looking at changing and adopting some energy legislation, to make sure Cherryland Electric, Traverse City Light and Power, and our rural energy partners were at the table. They had direct input very early on the legislation we ended up adopting. And in fact, based on their feedback and the feedback from the electrical co-ops statewide, we actually changed some of what was in the original language to exempt our co-ops for the very reason of making sure we weren't tying their hands to do what they were already doing so well. So I think that's an important piece to note and their leadership in this space. Also, a couple of other things. Why was it important for us to adopt some clean energy legislation? Well, because if we did not do that, we would leave billions on the table for Wisconsin, Illinois, Ohio, and other states that had already adopted clean energy standards to qualify for once in a generation billions in federal funding for this exact purpose, which is to build out renewable energy, build out renewable energy infrastructure in the state of Michigan. Because we actually adopted that legislation, we are now a leader in the country in accessing those once in a generation billions in federal dollars to build out our energy grid. And I do believe strongly in energy independence. The more Michigan is in a position to generate its own energy at a local and regional level, the more energy independence we have, brings down costs, and we are also one of the leaders as a state in clean energy jobs. So I have 30 seconds, but I will give my time back because I made the point I wanted to make. It's really important to lead, but also to lift up our local leaders who are already ahead of the curve on clean and renewable energy. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Rob.
I might have a little different take on this. Our co-ops didn't want to be part of it at all. They were already in a great position. They didn't want any part of this. The only savior to this energy package is that there's off-ramps. It gets too expensive, land can't be acquired, then they don't have to proceed with it. We are 10 years too far ahead in a bad way without doing nuclear first. This program of wind and solar does not work unless there's nuclear power part of the program and or also gas-fired plants. This does not work. Wind and solar can be part of the mix. I'm not against wind and solar. But if you don't have a solid base load, I was on energy my first term. MISO didn't want this to take place in the manner that it is. MISO is the grid with about 5-6 states that tells us when we got to turn on plants, turn off plants, how much power is being done. They are concerned about this. They are concerned there's not going to be enough base load to take care of the energy needs we need in our area. Again, I'm not against wind and solar in the proper perspective, but without nuclear and no new gas-fired plants can be done unless they offer carbon capture. Well, carbon capture is not a benefit yet. There is nobody doing carbon capture that will work. If we had that, we might be in a little better shape, but we don't have it today. What I do say is there are some things you can do. Community solar, if you so desire, that gives, it's not mandated. It's actually where your communities can do it if they want to. It's 50 kilowatt or less. 50 kilowatt or less community solar projects can be done by your local communities. And they work really well where they do. Cherryland Electric has a community solar project. They're happy. It was privately invested. It wasn't done by the government. These were private investors that did it. You could make it that way too. You have that authority to do. This one that we passed is a mandate. And it doesn't let our locals have much flexibility. If it's over 50 kilowatts, and the community says, we don't want it, or we want it somewhere else, and the energy company wants to do it anyway, they go back to the state, they get it licensed, they come back and they do it without the community's input. So we can do it far better. This wasn't the bill. It was not done well. And I think there could be real problems down the road. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Rattle. Ms. Albro.
Okay, thank you. First, I'd like to say that nuclear is in the bill. In fact, Palisades is, in the process of reopening, and they're working on, making that happen safely. So I like to look at everything with a return on investment approach. Whether it's financial, it could also be, quality of life kinds of return on investment for people. So I believe it's also a new energy, paradigm, just like a new housing paradigm. Our heat pumps now are at the stage or the technological advancement that they work in the UP. And mini splits. I've seen it in action and it works just fine. Yes, there will be an investment and that there will have to be, a return on investment type of process that we go through. Community solar and wind groundwork is an excellent group that is championing this. Raising and eliminating the utility cap on solar installations. Right now, it's very low. We're planning on putting in solar next year, and we fortunately have Great Lakes Energy, which is another co-op that we love, and that it will work. But I have an EV also, and I have a hard time driving from my house in Antrim County all the way to Manistee County and back and all over the place. So I think we need more EV charging stations. I was in Onekama yesterday, and behind their laundromat, they have two level 2 charging stations. So while people are washing and drying their clothes, they can charge their cars. I thought that was a really very generous perk there. We need to weatherize existing structures, and there's grant money for that. We have energy efficient appliances. So when we're replacing appliances and lighting, energy saving credits and rebates are out there. And so these changes would not only help the Michigan Healthy Climate goals, but they would also lower utility costs for people. And the free market is starting to see that this is actually an economic advantage to go in this direction. So I would also like to recommend the Office of Rural Prosperity, which is through Leo, and they have some excellent grants, and they'll help rural areas find the grants to help with this, these goals. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Albro. We are going to turn over to Jack Bergman's prepared statement.
From wind and solar to traditional oil and gas, I strongly support an all-of-the-above approach for ensuring Americans in every community have access to safe, reliable, and affordable energy. In rural communities like ours, it's critical that we continue to emphasize the role that oil and gas play in maintaining our current way of life. These crucial energy sources drive our economy and power our society, so we mustn't fully diminish their part in energy production amid the state's push for renewables. It's unrealistic and just plain unachievable to expect every American to give up the energy sources they rely on to heat their homes or fuel their cars. In today's economy, the average Michigander can't afford to switch to an electric vehicle or dabble in other expensive renewable ventures. That's why I have continued to champion the Rural Energy for America program, which aids rural communities as they begin the transition to renewable energy sources. This initiative offers grants and guaranteed loans for developing clean energy systems and installing energy efficient infrastructure. We also need to shore up our electric grid with continued investment so we're prepared for the future diversified energy requirements. Finally, a vibrant energy sector and healthy environment are not mutually exclusive goals. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can continue to utilize our abundant natural resources without compromising the investments we have already made in renewable energy, energy efficiency, and environmental protection policy. These things all work in tandem, and so must we.
Ms. Barr?
Thank you so much. Yeah, we're at a period of energy transition. And I think what's really important in rural areas like ours is that we do that very responsibly. You know we need to have reliable and sufficient energy, especially in areas where we get negative 30, 40 below zero. I say we can't have UP popsicles, right? Or anywhere. And so that's right, we need an array of energy sources as we face this. And some of this a lot of this comes from aid to our rural communities through subsidies. For example, we have a rural savings plan through the Farm Bill that can help reduce some of these barriers as families and businesses move towards more clean energy initiatives. And then just more broadband infrastructure that we need to continue to invest in, like our energy grid, right? We are part of a 15-state energy grid, and we want to make sure that folks can continue to pull from that, even as we bring these new energy sources like renewables online here to support this time period that we're in. The other thing is being very careful that we are protective of our most vulnerable families, because energy transition, of course, costs money, and that cost is passed on to our end user. And so as we go through this transition, we also just are very aware that we make sure that for those who are paying for this, they can continue to afford to keep their homes.
Thank you, Ms. Barr. Ms. Bragg?
Yeah, so Rep. Slotkin believes in an all of the above approach and energy policy to address climate change. I believe, an all of the above approach is what most Michiganders would like to see. I drive a hybrid myself. When it's more efficient to use the battery, use the battery. When it's more efficient to use the gas, it uses gas. It saves me money. I've saved so much money driving my hybrid around the state. I love it. It's not for everybody, but it's an all of the above approach. So she advocates for moving beyond a sole reliance on fossil fuels. So she wants to support an diverse energy mix that includes wind, solar, hydrogen, and yes, nuclear power. We understand that we need to be engaged in the local communities that we're doing right now. Take your feedback to make sure that it gets into the policy, and make sure that once it's in the policy, we give you the support and the funds to meet those expectations. And then, of course, if expectations and efficiency of the policy are not working out, she supports a rigorous monitoring of the efficiency of it to recalibrate and make sure that we get it right.
Thank you, Mr. Bragg. Moving to question 3. We have had some great legislators in the past that have engaged in subcommittees and committees on transportation, childcare, tourism, natural resources, recreation, coastal issues, veterans issues, appropriations, and more. What committee or subcommittees would you be interested in serving on, and why? We are going to start with Mr. Bratton.
So Michigan is the #2 agriculturally diverse state in the country, and #1 with a regular access to water. We grow a lot of different things here. So with how important agriculture is to the state of Michigan, and given Rep. Slotkin's background, growing up early spending her early childhood on a farm, and she's made it her mission to get on the agricultural committee. And as of right now, she is the only congressperson from the state of Michigan that sits on the agricultural committee. So it's very important for her. I think at the Senate level, she'll want to continue that advocacy. Given her CIA background, she's also been the chairwoman of Homeland Security and been on subcommittees in intelligence and counterterrorism. And she's also used her position on Armed Services Committee and Veteran Affairs Committee to advocate for veterans and military families. All those things I think she'll continue to want to do at the federal level as well, given her desire to ensure we have a very robust middle class. I do believe she'll want to be on some kind of small business type committee as well.
Thank you, Mr. Bratton. Representative Kofia.
Thank you. So, on, my current committee assignments, I feel, are well matched to the rural nature of our district. And one I will highlight, I'm on 5 committees in the House. I'm on health policy, I'm on agriculture, I am on families, children, and seniors. I am the majority vice chair. I am on economic development and small business. And I am also on higher education. So one that I will highlight, and again, I feel they all really reflect really well with, we have community colleges in Northern Michigan, agriculture being the second largest sector, it's certainly a huge part of my district. They're all good matches, but one I will especially highlight, particularly given the focus of today, I wanted to be on economic development and small business because that is critical, the lifeblood of the 103rd. We're mostly small and medium-sized businesses. And so to be able to be at the table, voting directly on policy, working with the committee chair, moving things that are good for my district. Some of what we've been able to do, the Northern Michigan Regional Chamber Alliance, which of course Benzie Area Chamber is a member of, some of their top priorities is going to be like beating a drum that you keep hearing, but it's because they are the issues I've heard the most. Housing and childcare. These are some of the top most critical issues when we talk about developing and attracting and retaining workforce and talent. And so I have advocated for those things, some of the housing, the brownfield redevelopment change that I mentioned in my opening statement where we removed the barrier and allowed housing to be a use for brownfield redevelopment funds. That came through economic development and small business committee. It was a slam dunk. I was excited to vote for it, to put that tool on the table. Childcare, as I mentioned, 65 million additional in this year's budget to support our childcare providers who are small business owners and who provide critical care infrastructure for our workers to be able to participate in the workforce. We voted for a research and development tax credit in economic development and small business to work with our businesses and give them a tax break as they are developing and expanding their research and development. Lastly, I'm not going to go through all the committees I'm on and what I think how those are useful, but one thing I will highlight is health policy. I grew up in a family that worked very hard but couldn't afford health insurance and didn't have a job that gave us health insurance. And my lifelong passion for public service has to do with expanding healthcare access to every person, man, woman, child in this state. And so mental health and rural healthcare access are huge priorities for me. I am working right now to try to find a partner in this region who would be willing to open up long-term mental health beds. I've heard from too many families, especially of juvenile children, who can't access the long-term mental health inpatient care that they need, and that is a dire critical need for our region. So I am ready to advocate for the appropriation, the funding, but I need a local partner who is willing to take that on, be the fiduciary and offer up that program. It's a critical need. So I'm excited about the committee assignments that I have. I think they match well with the needs of the district, and I will hopefully continue in those roles and continue to advocate for Northern Michigan. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Kofia. Ms. Romley.
So this, I think this quite a great question. This is less about me and more about how do we best apply. Maybe this comes from my years of experience running large organizations, trying to get the right people in the right job at the right time to accomplish the mission. So I look at it as a challenge. So for me personally, I'll talk a little bit about that, but of the 110, hopefully we can get those with the right skill sets, the right experience, and preferably coupled with their district needs and their perspectives that come from that to establish all that. And hands down, I think life is a team sport. So hopefully as a team, we look at all of that as it goes forward. Having said that, since I retired up here 6 years ago, I have been intimately involved with a lot of the nonprofits in the area, et cetera. So I better understand the nuances of northern Michigan as opposed to the urban areas. And there are distinct nuances, and understanding both of those might be very critical as we draw some parallels and put forth policy. So as much as I love having my fingers on the money, I think it's important to follow the money because money shows priorities. The policy side of things is hopefully what is establishing how and where that money is going to be spent. So I would be open to being on the policy side to be part of that directive. And in the areas, certainly economic development and business, small business, I've partnered with small businesses my entire career despite working for a Fortune 50 corporation. So that's a totally natural fit. But in this area, I will always be a little bit, I always would tell my staff I'm a little bit schizophrenic because we have to not only address current challenges and tackle those problems that we face, but we also always have to be looking to the future. So for me, I think children are our future, and to what extent we can make sure we've got appropriate healthcare, that education is moving that, we've got skilled trades to be able to drive some of those policies, which I think we're a little out of balance across the state, would be interesting for me personally. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Madden. Ms. Albert.
Thank you. Well, I want to be on every committee, but you're not allowed to be on every one of them. I have a habit of sometimes spreading myself too thin, I guess that would be. But anyway, based on my experiences and what I thought would be most helpful to my constituents, I narrowed it down to some. Definitely families, children, and seniors. As a childcare center owner and working with employers to open their own on-site centers, I found that unless you're a wealthy parent, you can't afford quality childcare. And I really would like to see in the whole country, but maybe the state could be the first to have a public option for childcare on a sliding fee scale. So that those that are making like $15 an hour can go back to work because they don't have to worry about finding childcare that they can afford. Elder care again, and you know, it'll be interesting to see who wins the national election because I think that there are many opportunities for federal appropriations to come through the state as well. Economic development, small business. I've owned several small businesses, and especially the 30 years of a retail business. I saw it went through many ups and downs, and I used the SBA loan process to fund. I would borrow and then pay back and borrow to grow my business. And I would love to work on that because I think that small businesses are the culture of every small rural community. Education as a teacher and working with teachers all over the country, I saw that the children living in poverty are the ones who get the least in our educational system. And so I would like to make sure that we have equity and that children are engaged in their learning. I think with the devices and some of the teaching strategies that we have, our children are becoming disengaged from their education. As a small farmer, agriculture is interesting to me. I am part of the Torch Lake Farmers Co-op and I sell at farmers markets, so I have that experience with local nutritious food. And then I could combine that with education, saying that children should learn how to grow their own food and how to prepare it in a healthy way. So appropriations, I would love to be on the Agricultural Rural Development Appropriations Committee and school aid and education, of course, energy, Great Lakes environment, but the list goes on. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Albert. Representative Roth.
Yeah, I've been on health policy for 4 years straight. I've been on transportation 4 years straight, economic development for 4 years straight. This year I was on energy my first term, got removed from that, put on ag, which is still good. So I'm been blessed. The economic development has been very busy, and it needs to be more busy today with this new tip wage law and paid time off. That's gonna kill a business like Crystal Mountain. The number of dollars that they're gonna have to come up with for the paid time off part is gonna be devastating. We should already be working on that in Lansing today. We've had no conversations about it other than meetings in the district. Health policy has been very busy, of course. Transportation, I wanted to highlight one in particular where EVs. The mobility department came in and talked to us at transportation, said, we're gonna leverage $1 billion from the federal government to put EVs in the state of Michigan. I had one simple question: how many are going north of Clay? The question was answered. Someday, sir, we'd like to do that. Someday. We'd love to put them in the parks and we'd love to put them on the beach and places like that. That would be wonderful. But that's down the road. So, there's things we need to work on. Transportation, let's go there. In 2027, we're $2.7 billion short of road fund. Some of the taxes that were put in will sunset potentially. And we got to come up with $2.7 billion in new funding that could have came out of the $9 billion we had that the federal government gave us in 2022. Fortunately, that money got spent on splash pad schools, museums, and zoos. We blew it. And I will take partial blame because I was in the majority in 2022. Unfortunately, our appropriations chair believed we were headed for a terrible economy was in a downturn. Didn't want to spend any of that money, so we left it for others to spend in 2023. We could have put $2.5 billion towards roads and bridges. That would have made a huge difference going forward. Instead, it got spent. So committee work is important. You do not get to sit on appropriations and policy. You do have to pick one or the other generally. And there's been one or two people that have gotten both, but very rare. So as 110 of you got to figure out where you want to be. I would love to continue on with where I'm at. Maybe swap out energy for ag. But if I stay on ag, I'm fine with that too. So that's where I plan to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Ms. Barr.
Thank you. Veteran Affairs for me is one that's very near and dear to my heart, and as an enlisted family for, over a decade, for 15 years. And on the enlisted side, I think we have a unique perspective that we can bring to Washington, DC. And that was definitely one of the reasons why I even went to get a law degree. Because for example, even with folks of my era, we had a drawdown in the force. We offered buyouts to young Marines and folks in the Army, and they got out and they used that money, for instance, as a down payment on a home, and then maybe had post-traumatic stress or had some type of disability, filed for VA benefits, and then we're told they had to repay all the money that had been given to them. This resulted in some service members even becoming homeless, right? And this is still something that's not fixed, right? So this is just an example of some of the issues that predominantly fall on working class families that serve on the enlisted side and then often struggle when they get out to have voice. And I see it even now around the district. I'm still meeting with veterans who don't know about their benefits or don't know how to access them. And just in general, also who rely on VA care. And that's really important that we continue to fully fund and have a robust VA system. My opponent voted to not adequately fund the VA. That was something that's really scary to me for our district, but also just personally. But, my husband relies on that care, as do many families in our district. Armed Services is another committee. I believe strongly in having United States military readiness around the world. And we do that too by making sure we're taking care of the military family. Over the past year, we had, for the first time ever, we didn't have a commandant of the Marine Corps because we were blocking military promotions. This is not good. It's not good for our national security. It's not good for talent acquisition and retention. It's not good for military families or military spouses. So we have to be really serious about what we're doing with our armed services. Agriculture, we are a rural district and, you know, the Farm Bill does a lot with rural communities like ours. And then finally, this is not a committee, but I'm really passionate about the bipartisan problem solvers caucus. This is something that senatorial candidate Alyssa Slotkin is a part of, but in order to join this committee, you actually have to bring someone from the other side of the aisle. And then what they do is they look at some of the pressing issues of our time and then they propose legislation. So it's really neat. I think it's a great initiative to help try to break through gridlock, and I'd love to be a part of that.
We are going to play Congressman Bergman's statement.
In our next Congress, I look forward to continuing my work and service on the House Armed Services Committee, Budget Committee, and Veterans Affairs Committee. I am currently the chairman of the House Armed Services Subcommittee on Intelligence and Special Operations, as well as the chair of the House Budget Committee Oversight Task Force. On armed services, I will continue to work to refocus our military on lethality over liberalism and to strengthen our national security through the readiness and capabilities of our fighting forces. On VA, I will continue to ensure our veterans and their families receive the benefits and care they deserve. And on Budget Committee, I will work to rein in the out-of-control, unauthorized spending in Washington so Americans can keep more of their hard-earned money. From my experiences as a small business owner, a commercial airline pilot, a lieutenant general in the United States Marine Corps, I have gained an in-depth understanding of the importance of these three committees: keeping a balanced and efficient budget, strengthening our military, and fighting for our veterans they're all of great importance to me. That's why I intend to build on the progress we have had in each issue area, bringing the needs of the First District into focus as I represent and work for you on these key committees.
We will now be moving to question 4. The Northern Michigan Chamber Alliance works very hard to level the playing field with policy and funding as it relates to popular areas like Detroit and Grand Rapids. We hope that you will continue to partner with our 17 chambers of commerce and economic development organizations with regards to policy and appropriations for rural Michigan. What policy ideas regarding rural needs do you plan to address? We will be starting with Ms. Albro.
I think that the Benzie bus is an excellent example of rural transportation. And, you know, there probably are things that you would like to see improved, but from what I can see, it is a model for other rural areas. And I know it's not cheap to provide the type of customized transportation that they provide. So I would like to see every community have a great rural transportation system where seniors could count on a ride to healthcare, the grocery store, and people wouldn't even need to invest in cars. That's a very expensive part of living these days. And so if they could have a good, trusty rural transportation system, it would help there too. Definitely childcare, as I've talked already before. I'm finding that most of the rural areas in Michigan are childcare deserts where people cannot find good childcare and that meets their needs. Sometimes they need weekend care, sometimes they need evening care, and it's just not there. So definitely we need to be looking at that and making sure that we're listening to our communities and finding out what the needs are. And then with the 65 million and hopefully more, someday we'll be able to pay our staffs better and really provide that care for everybody who needs it. It's an economic decision. I think we need to focus on our agriculture. That's like a jewel up here for our tourism, but also for nutritious local food. We have the 10 cents a meal program that is pretty successful, providing farmers with an income and children nutritious food. I would like to see help, maybe look into how that could be grown and replacing maybe corn and soybeans. And there are so many things that hemp could be used for, including insulation, and the seed is very high in protein, clothing, fiber, lots of things. And I think it could be a great crop for Michigan. Housing, homelessness. There's more homelessness than we know. Lots of people serve couches and live in somebody's basement. So like I spoke before, I think there are solutions. And for affordable housing for people making a smaller wage. And clean water, that's definitely something that's a high priority up here too. We rely on it for our tourism, we rely on it for drinking and bathing and swimming and boating. There shouldn't be a question about what we do about clean water. We start with the septic systems, and we find money to make that work. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Andre. Representative Rob.
Thank you for the question. It is good. I heard the Office of Rural Development mentioned earlier today. Office of Rural Development is 70% of the state of Michigan is involved with the Office of Rural Development for $10 million for the total amount of the 70%. That money gets spent very quickly and it's not effective for the whole region. That is an area where we asked for a lot more in the past, and we finally got 10 million. The first year of the Office of Rural Development, we got just enough money to actually fund the people working in the park, and that was it. That is a focus that we asked for to help our businesses with different loans that they can get. That needs to be funded appropriately. And these, again, can be grants or loans that can be paid back too. And that office right now is not viable office. It needs to do better. Again, for 70% of the state's rural, at least. The last two budgets that we had in Michigan, north of Midland in 2023, about 20% of the budget went to any part that's rural or northern Michigan, including UP. This last budget was 10%. Went north of Flint, or its rural areas. We have to advocate for northern Michigan. We gotta make sure we're included in the budget program. We need to be louder. How much louder I get, I'm going pretty good down Lansing. I think everybody knows that I've talked to, but the real key is to make sure that we're not left out. I heard something about the rural development or R&D tax credit. They came to me and said, Roth, you need to vote for this because it's going to help Marty Infante. Marty Infante is the UP's investment guy, which I love. Marty, he's a great guy. How did that help northern Michigan? It did. We weren't even one of the regions considered. Now with some Senate action, we may be considered again in the R&D tax credit, but it didn't happen in the House. So it's being an advocate and being loud. And understand there is a northern Michigan that a lot of these folks love to come up and vacation with us or stay at a short-term rental or go boating or agritourism or whatever else. But it's being more of an advocate, yelling louder because they still aren't listening. And until we do that, we are going to be left out. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative Rob. Ms. Barr.
All right, well, this kind of feels maybe like a summation, because we've already heard so many great things. We've heard about childcare. You know, the Michigan economy, we lose about $3 billion annually just from not having reliable childcare for families. We know we have deserts up here with that. We've heard about our fresh water. We got 21% of the world's fresh water supply, and our congressional district has the most shoreline of anyone. And we get federal funding every year that we need to make sure we have to combat invasive species in our Great Lakes and to help keep our water clean. NOAA, NELPINA there is another great initiative where we actually are studying our fresh water. If you haven't been out there, it's very cool. You should go. The sanctuary for the shipwrecks right there. We've already talked about housing and we've talked about energy. One thing we haven't really talked about though is infrastructure. And, you know, this is really important throughout our district and even the most basic infrastructure, like having rural broadband internet. You know, we still don't have that in areas in this district. And that's really unacceptable. You know, we're nearing a time period right now where we have folks talking about artificial intelligence. You know, there's probably some of us waiting for John Connor to come running through a door at any minute. But the thing is, like, we can't be left behind again, right? Because we're still getting the internet. And that's really important because that is something our small businesses need. We have opportunities with COVID. We have people now working remote. They need access to that. They need to be able to attend Zoom meetings. We have kids going to school, right? They need access to the world. They need access to the world. We have, you know, people want to get online degrees or they want to get training or they want to go to school. Internet access right now is so very important. And, you know, we have like the Infrastructure Act. We had money that Michigan got for that for rural broadband internet. This is something my opponent voted against. This is a bipartisan bill. We also got money from that for infrastructure for modernizing the Sioux locks up in Sault Ste. Marie. That's huge. That's huge for our economy. What comes through the Sioux locks. We've got roads being built through that initiative. Bridges. So this is huge. And, you know, in other areas up in our UP, you know, we're looking at light and it's really expensive to modernize and take care of that. So infrastructure and what it can do to help bring growth to me is really important. Let me see here, healthcare access, right? Healthcare access is another thing throughout our district. Well, we have a very rural area, so I know there's interest in having more of these telehealth type services. And of course, that's reliant on what? The internet, being connected to the world. And just in general, you know, we're losing a hospital. We did in Ontonagon up in the UP. It's the second largest county in Michigan. I'm from Sheboygan. Our rural hospital went bankrupt in 2012. I saw what it did to that town. My mom was a nurse there. We had about 400 people that were just all of a sudden out of work. What do you do? And so to me, this is why it's so important to show up for your congressional district because we need a voice and we need to make sure that we're connecting people and we're getting access, not only with our infrastructure, but it's tied into everything else, like our healthcare too. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Barr. We will now be turning to Congressman Bergman's statement.
Broadband infrastructure. I will continue to fight for our district and these. Our rural and remote communities face unique challenges, from healthcare resources to postal operations and access to broadband infrastructure. I will continue to fight for our district and these needs by making telehealth more accessible, expanding our reliable high-speed internet connectivity, and keeping the pressure on Lansing and DC's out-of-touch bureaucrats who often overlook our concerns and requests for their one-size-fits-all policies and downstate focus. During my time in Congress, I have spearheaded letters and legislation that tackled these rural issues head-on, and I plan to continue keeping the pressure on as we move forward. Ultimately, when our first district thrives, so does the entire state.
Mr. Brandon.
Yeah, so Alyssa has been very proactive in engaging with Northern Michigan Chamber Alliance. I believe we had several meetings. And the last one was a month ago. I did a Zoom over at the Ironfish Distillery, which I want to go there after this if you guys have time. But it just shows that how much this Chamber Alliance means to Alyssa. And I think we are looking forward to continuing those collaborations, discussions. Her platform is very simple. It's rebuilding the middle class, and that's focusing on lowering costs of housing, healthcare, and prescription drugs, and increasing job growth. So a lot of time in Congress, she's been focusing on things that rebuild our manufacturing supply chains and bringing good jobs back to Michigan. Another thing that she likes to focus on and say is food security is national security. So we've already talked about agriculture and how important it is to Michigan, but through her CIA lens, it is a national security concern and something I think is very important to the rural parts of Michigan. And again, something I don't think is mentioned yet is cyber. How much of a cyber issue we've got in this country, and especially places that have small businesses and rules that don't have the resources to combat that. With her cyber background, I think we'll be able to look and build for our future. I want to double tap fresh water and making it clean. She's worked with a lot of Michigan's congressional delegation to make sure that there's been some PFAS cleanup sites over in Oscoda, works with Air Force Base and some of the PFAS that they left around. And so those are very rural community that shouldn't be drinking those type of chemicals. So she's going to continue those efforts in the Senate.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Representative Cofia.
Thank you. So partnering with our Northern Michigan Regional Chamber Alliance has been really important to me when I was on the county commission, now as a state rep, and meeting regularly, chatting with Michelle as the chair of the Benzie area chamber and my other chambers within the 103rd. Some of the things, we've already talked about it so many times, but as I said, their policy agenda, some of their top priorities are childcare and housing because of the impact on the workforce. And so I won't belabor that because you've heard me talk about the work already there. However, another key piece, our chamber, wisely so, are big champions for having strong schools and public education. We're literally training the next generations of leaders and workers in our community. So something that I have been able to tackle, and just an example of advocating for Northern Michigan and partnering on key priorities. I grew up in a community, Kalkaska County, where our school district ran out of money when I was in high school. Does anyone remember that in the 90s? They closed 3 months early because they ran out of money. We have had inequity in funding from the state for my entire life. And when they reopened in the fall, they had to cut something in order to make payroll and keep the doors open for the classrooms. And what they cut was busing. Now, that might not seem a big deal if you're in a downstate urban district, but in Northern Michigan, Kalkaska County school bus routes, 400 square miles. Benzie Central, it would be the equivalent if you drove all of the buses in one day from end to end their route. It'd be the equivalent of Benzonia to San Francisco. There has been a huge inequity in funding from the state to cover rural school districts' transportation costs. And that has meant money that's not available to go into rural school kids' classrooms for art, for music, for mental health, for college preparation. So, as a freshman legislator with that kind of lived experience and knowing how important investing in our students was, I went to Lansing. My first standalone policy bill was a per pupil per mile equity formula for rural school buses. And that's nice that I got that policy out there, but I went much further. In my first 6 months, we got it into the state budget. There is now a rural equity formula in the state budget, $125 million additional going into school districts, Benzie, TCAPS, Kalkaska, all over rural Michigan. And that happened because you have a rural Democrat at the table with my caucus bringing that lived experience. And I don't always have to shout. I can just talk to my colleagues and let them know this is important to kids in Michigan and strong schools in Michigan and getting it done. So those are the kinds of things you have seen from me as your rep and what you can continue to expect from me. Problem solving, working with whatever willing partner I can find to get things done for Northern Michigan. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Cofia. Ms. Trombley.
I think partnership is indeed key. I'm going to tackle this because I agree with the vast majority of what's been said here in terms of articulating the challenges that we face in Northern Michigan. I would approach it slightly differently just because of my experiences. One, I would look at the implications. So I think some of the implications of what has been done, particularly over the last 2 years, when you look at some of the changes here with the clean energy, and I'm a bit miffed with some of the reductions in the education. When we look at the ultimate implications of those in our areas, it's going to be different perhaps in the rural areas than in the urban areas. And I think we need to always be cognizant of the implications of our decisions and actions. And I think that I would look at the consequences of some of the actions that have happened to date. From my business experience, I would also look at how do we use lessons learned from other rural areas? Let's pull best practices, lessons learned, whether it's regarding transportation, health services, childcare, et cetera. Let's leverage that and share those best practices across the state. One area's investment can benefit another area in Michigan, so that we can pull that thread there and take advantage of those other investments. I would be very focused. I've got, in my mind, 3 focus areas that I know it's been mentioned, but I think we have to table count. It's the internet, it's the energy, and the infrastructure, because those drive everything. And in my mind, when businesses can thrive, the workforce thrives, communities thrive. And my approach, I think what we need is a different approach, besides me taking more of a business type approach to the partnership here. I would suggest that we need to look at building the business case for our money differently. Up north, we live here, so we're concerned about how we live, work, and play here. But our area is visited by how many folks from downstate? So building a business case that leverages their involvement and benefit of our place where we live, work, and play should perhaps factor into some of that. I'm not one to necessarily work, more money, but I think when you're working within a zero-sum game, making sure we get our fair share of that, I think that might be a new way of approaching how we go about funding those challenges.
Thank you, Ms. Conway. Moving to our last question, and of course, it's my favorite question. What is your favorite small business that you have discovered in your district while on the campaign trail? We are starting with Ms. Barr.
Okay, so I think there are so many, so it can't just be one. This is one of the favorite, let's say that, because there's so many great small businesses, including a Bar's Bar in Negaunee, which I particularly like, because of course it's spelled the same. So I walked in and they gave me a drink right away. It's like, I could stay here. This is nice. Very cool. Just toured not too long ago, a very neat small business up in the UP where they are taking wires. So kind of like your wires from, common everyday use that you would just trash or throw in a landfill. And they found a way to separate the plastic from the wire and then refine the copper that's in there to such a pure percentage that they can then use that copper in things like EVs or, whatever it is, any kind of new use. And so that was really neat to see. I mean, very, very cool, because it's, there's a lot of uses right now. Copper's on the rise. So that was pretty cool.
Thank you, Ms. Barr. We are going to now hear from Congressman Bergman.
My favorite recently discovered small businesses were Rapid City Tavern in Kalkaska, or possibly Wilson Creek Cafe in Powers near Norway. These 2 businesses represent Northern Michigan and the UP well. Great service, great hospitality, and good conversation. I'll end with a more serious note, though, based on that topic. Our country was founded in ale houses and churches. We must never lose that unity we find as Americans through good and thoughtful communication and conversation.
Mr. Brad.
Rep. Slotkin's campaign cycles, every campaign cycle, with the campaigns heating up in the fall, it's getting to the October season. They, and including me, love to go to different cider mills, apple orchards, pumpkin patch, and just do our whole October fall season. But I will leave it up to y'all or you to come up and afterwards and tell me, where should we go in Benzie? If that's Benzie, if that's Storm Cloud Brewery, because my wife and I really like going to the breweries in Northern Michigan. They're all very family friendly, and we've got 2 young boys. And so if that's Hop Lot in Sutton's Bay, or if that's Shorts Brewery in Antrim, or Lake Ann Brewery, there's always something for the family to do, and if the parents can let the kids go play for a little bit, and the parents can take a break, that'd be wonderful. So please come up and let me know where we should go in Benzie.
Thank you, Mr. Brennan. We're going to move to Representative Cofia.
Thank you. So, I mean, I have favorite places in all three of the counties that I have the honor of representing, in the non-grand terms of Benzie. So we'll go with Benzie today. I have a couple of favorites in Benzie County. The first of which I talked about when I was here 2 years ago, Lake Ann Grocery. Such a cool place because it's not just a grocery store. You just keep going and going. Every corner there's another nook with any possible. If you need a WD-40 can that's this big or this big, they'll have it. They just have everything. And so and they're just such kind folks. They're sort of an institution in Lake Ann. Lake Ann Brewery is another great place, and I think Matt is doing some great things over there. He never lets you talk politics there, which is probably smart. And he always has lots of great live music. It's extremely family friendly, and it's clearly sort of one of those fourth spaces where everyone from the community can get together. Finally, I have to give a big shout out. You can't make me pick just one, so I'm gonna do three. I'm gonna give you a shout out to the Red Door Cafe. Jessie from the Red Door opened her doors to us. I've tried to do monthly coffee hours in all three of my counties throughout my term and have folks come in and share their ideas and ask their questions, but it's such a cool vibe. It's a really beautiful coffee house, and she's also got a little store attached to it that sells a lot of made locally and made in Michigan products. So big fan of the Red Door as well. So there you go. There's my top three.
Thank you, Representative Cofia. Mr. Allen.
I have to echo Red Door Cafe because I spent some time there, and what a great little place, and the multi-purpose, it's just totally, I think reflective of the area where we live, and how they use it for their regular business meetings and their gatherings. It's got great coffee too, which I love. But I will have to say that since it's been said, I'm gonna table pound another organization, which I think is also just so indicative of the area where we live and why I feel so blessed to have returned back here to my home state and live here. I pinch myself every day. For those of you that haven't been there, JNS Hamburg on South Airport in Traverse City. That organization, Tiffany and her husband who run that organization during COVID, it's a small little mom and pop shop. During COVID though, when the school shut down, they decided they were going to feed the children, and they have a project, Feed the Kids, which is supported by all local donations. They raise all of their own money. They now have 6 coolers across 5 counties where they provide foods, no question asked. They provide, lunches in these coolers for children and families to come retrieve them. So if you aren't aware of it, please look it up. They are phenomenal. I've been blessed to have several folks come up and knock from downstate. We go to lunch there to support them. Great mission, great people, and just indicative of how great this Northwest Michigan is.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. Ms. Allen.
It was a difficult decision, but I picked a place I've been to a few times. One that brings joy to Benzie County, I think, is St. Ambrose Cellars.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. Representative Rob.
This isn't fair because northern Michigan is small businesses.
Yes.
This is our lifeblood of this area. And there's so many people doing such great things and variety of things, but I'll answer the Storm Cloud Brewery starts out because Rick Schmidt and I worked at Crystal Mountain together, so I gotta throw him out. And then he's allowed me to have coffee hours there, and then he has different events like Conservation District, so they're good overall. But I'm gonna tell you, M88 Coffee Shop in Bel Air might be the coolest place out there. This is Bel Air, not a huge community, but they have a cool coffee shop. And I call it cool. They have scones, they have coffee. This place, if you haven't been to it, and you're in Bel Air, go to M88 Coffee Shop. It is just like cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Rob.
The Benzie Area Chamber of Commerce, State Savings Bank, Crystal Mountain, and Traverse City Tourism, thank you for attending this event today. I want to give a special thanks to my moderator, Mark Klein. And thank you again to our candidates that were able to attend today. We hope this helps all of you with your decision on November 5th. This concludes our event. I know we're a little ahead of schedule, so if candidates, if you got a couple minutes to hang around in case somebody has a question, that would be appreciated. If you would like more information about what the chamber is working on in Benzie County, please let myself or any of my board members who are wearing these ribbons know. Thank you again for attending today and have a great rest of your day.
Let's get a picture.
Yeah, let's get a picture.
Oh, you guys want to do a picture?
Yeah, let's do a group picture. Wait for group picture, guys.
I like
Denise, could I give you the picture? I'll leave it open.
Stand in front of.
Yeah, we got to go.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for moderating. Appreciate it. Good to take a picture of all of us. Appreciate it. Good job.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Well done.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks for being here. Yeah, great to see you.
All right, we're getting pictures as soon as we can herd all the cats over here.
M88, I can't wait. I gotta go check
I
that
don't know
out.
if you need to do long or short. Thank you so much.
I was sitting here, once I know what I'm doing.
All right, got everybody in, Kathy, get in here. You got a phone open, I think, we're gonna have Denise. All right. Volunteer. All right. Yeah, there you go. Study your contrast there. Get us all in the middle. Back up. We can all angle.
Nope, I can do this. 1, 2, 3.
Cheese.
Got it.
All right, I think there's a couple more. Did you get one on your phone too?
No, but I want one like this.
Okay, all right.
Sit down on top
Stay-
of the,
Stay put.
yeah, thank you.
Denise.
Back, Michelle.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
One more, Michelle.
One more.
One more.
Thank you for
There we go. Thank you.
Thanks, Denise.
All right.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Allie. I know you're. Thanks, you too.
Stay down.
Oh, thank you.
Oh,
And only.
Well, good to meet you.
You're right. Let's say. I was gonna tell you, say,
Yeah, no, I haven't.
They have.
Exactly, yeah. Okay, I'll give you my card too.